Welcome to Community Crossfire, another point of view. I'm your host, Norman Oliver. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the last few weeks, especially last week with the Monday Club tribute. I had such a great time interviewing and talking to some of the guys a lot mature than I, are older. But I think that we have to continue to highlight our history and talk about people who trailblazed the way for us. So sticking to our Black history, every year I do this during Black History Month. We have folks come on, and Cy Wolford, who's really becoming one of the foremost, in my opinion, authoritarians on really tracing history. I mean, we have guys like Kenya Camper, who I love, who really could tell us the history of Howard High School and the schools in the city of Wilmington. Guys like Herman Holloway, who I like a lot when it comes to history of politics. Even Harmon Carey and Dr. Newton from University of Delaware, these guys really bring it to a full circle when it comes to Black history. I think Cy gets a little deeper. He gets into genealogy. He gets into stuff that people don't really talk about. So I'm looking forward to Cy bring us up to date on the movie 12 Year Slave, a movie that I had an opportunity to go see. Before I go to Cy, I want to say that I'm dedicating this show to Miss Janice Williams. Janice Williams, who works with or knows my good friend from Newark High. I'm saying Newark High School. But Janice, this show is dedicated to you. Coach Dave Henderson, I want to say Coach Dave Henderson and his wife, they said that you always watch the show, so I told them if they gave me Miss Williams' number, I would dedicate the show to her. Also, we had an incredible event this evening for Mr. Marvin Thomas. Marvin Thomas just retired from 30 years of Marvin's Casbar, and he's still going to be active in the community, but it was one of the more touching tributes that I've been a part of. And I really have to send a shout out to Bob Cannon and Councilwoman Hanifa Shabazz. We worked as a team, and I think that it was an incredible event. Again, also Auburn, a lot of folks from the Money Club was asking me how could they get a tape of last week's show. So, well, you can't put the number up, so they can't call you. So I don't know how they can get in touch with you. Thank you, Comcast. Wow. Oh, also, happy birthday to Kevin Washington, my good friend Kevin Washington. Had a nice time with you, too. Cy, so tell me about 12 Year Slave.
Thank you again for having me, Norman. And you saw the movie, and I saw the movie, and it had different impacts on all of us. Some of it made mad, some of it made angry. Trippy just said, hey, it got him to thinking. And we should have a discussion. I mean, we just can't let it go and say it was just another movie. I mean, this is a piece of history, and it is our history, and we came out of this history. And we have to go back and embrace Solomon Northup. We have to embrace him, and we have to say, hey, this is our brother. What did he go through? Okay? And when he got free, was he able to find his kidnappers and find the slave traders and find the folks who abused him incredibly?
Let me ask you a question as we move to, I thought 12 Year Slave was an incredible movie, and just to find out that person was free and then became enslaved. What do you say to people who say that they're tired of seeing these kind of movies implicating blacks, as like, in other words, saying that we have different talents now, like why we got to keep showing the Butler, 12 Year Slave, Django, whatever. What do you say to those folks? Well,
you got to know the history. We got to, as you continue to say, you got to speak the truth. If it's the truth, it's the truth. I mean, we can't live in ignorance. We can't say, well, let's forget about it. First, we have to learn what it was, and then we have to put it in context, because we're still dealing with the same type of problems. We got white guys going around shooting black guys and saying, no, self-defense. He put 10 bullets into that car, okay, and never got convicted. And so we still are in a situation where we're not getting justice, okay? And so we have to put this in context and say, did we ever get justice? How bad is it now, and how bad was it then?
Well, they were going to have a celebrity fight with the guy Zimmerman. Now he's a celebrity for shooting someone.
Absolutely.
What are you going to do? So tell, what do you got going on here?
Well, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the movie, first of all. And again, you and I saw the movie. But the movie is just one part of it. We have to say, hey, was Solomon Northup treated any worse or any better than anybody else? What country, what world was he living in? Okay, so we have to look at the world that Solomon Northup lived in when he went in and when he came out. And then, as I said, he found the kidnappers, the guys who drugged him and chained him and put him in a slave pen, and the guys who sold him into slavery and took him down to New Orleans. And he found the slave owners who had enslaved him. Okay, and he took him to court.
Let me ask you a question. And folks, I hope that you're watching. You know, a lot of people watch this show and they watch it intensely all the time, and some people don't like to get into black history. So they say, I'm turning the TV because, you know, it's boring, like I don't want to deal with history. And that's your thing, you could turn. But when I saw it, I thought those guys were his friends who drugged him, but they weren't?
They weren't his friends. They were kidnappers, okay? They intentionally wanted to make $900, and $900 was the number. They sold him for $900.
Wow.
Okay? And so they conned him into a business deal. He was going to take some freight from Saratoga Springs down to Washington, D.C., and he was going to make $1 a day. But then when they got him down there, okay, they drugged him, and they sold him into slavery.
Wow.
Okay? So this is where we are. These are the pictures you will remember from the movie. For those who haven't seen the movie yet, we're just going to give you a sketch of what the movie looked like. We're talking 1841, okay? Before the Civil War. Before the Civil War, 90% of blacks are still in slavery, okay? He's up in New York. He's a free black, and his parents were free. So he'd never seen slavery or didn't know anything about slavery, and he had his free papers. You had to have free papers to show you that you were free. He's living with his family. He's got a wife and 2 kids up in Saratoga Springs. 2 guys came to him and said, hey, we want you to take a load of freight down to Washington, D.C., and we'll give you $1 a day. So he says, good deal. Was a business deal, and he took it. When he got down there, they drugged him, and they chained him and started beating him up, and they put him in a slave pen. This is a picture which wasn't in the movie, should have been in the movie. This is what a slave pen looked like, and it's called slave pen like pig pen. They used to just stick slaves in there. Every slave trader had a slave pen.
Wow.
Washington, D.C., they used to sell, you could sell slaves in Washington, D.C. in 1841, just like any other major.
So this is in Washington, D.C.?
This is Washington, D.C. This
where the president was?
Where the president was. This is the capital of the country. There are slave pens on the street, okay, buying and selling slaves, okay? And they sold this guy into slavery.
And he was an educated guy.
He was an educated guy. And you saw them whipping him, you know, to basically kind of subdue him.
Wow.
And the beatings were incredible. They finally again got him on a ship, and he's again talking to this slave trader and saying, I shouldn't be here. I'm free. I've been kidnapped. And obviously the slave trader didn't talk to him.
Wow.
You see folks here, and this is an incredible picture. If you can see the detail of this picture, you see one guy with a iron bar around his neck, and some of them have masks on, and they have chains around their neck, and this is the way they treated slaves.
You know, I used to listen to Al Plant talk about Willie Lynch, and you know, I've read the book a few times, and one part in his picture reminded me of Willie Lynch. The guy act like they were brothers, him and the other guy, Nordstrom, and then as soon as the guy's slave owner showed up, he's like, "Oh, wow, remember what I'm saying?" That part in the movie, it was incredible.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, he's about to put them on a ship and take them to New Orleans. Now we get into good guy, bad guy. The first slave owner that he sold the guy to was, quote unquote, a good slave owner, whatever that was. Okay, and he let him play the violin. Okay, so let him play the violin.
That's incredible.
Okay, and so he was treated very well. This slave owner went bankrupt. Okay, and Solomon Northup said, why don't you let me go? I want to let you go. You shouldn't be here. And he said, I got $900 into you. I can't let you go. I need the money. And we're back to business deal. We were property, okay? And so this guy was, although they were friends and he was a nice slave owner, et cetera, he said, I got money.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think, Solomon Nordstrom, you know, because he was a bright guy, so he was able to write down what was going on. Do you think, was that common? Is it more cases back then in 1841 like this case?
Well, we're going to get to down the road.
Okay.
Okay. The 1850 Fugitive Slave Law.
Okay.
Which allowed folks to, and again, what we have to distinguish, Solomon Northup was free, but there were a lot of runaway slaves.
Right.
Okay. Because of the 1850 slave law, they were allowing Southerners, Southern slave owners and Southern slave catchers to come and grab folks off the street. Okay. Wow. And so the way Solomon Northup was treated was not unusual. The only thing unusual around it is that he was free. He was a free man.
See, my point was that I wonder if there were other free men who fell in, who got bamboozled like him.
Patty Cannon. I'm sure you know the legend of Patty Cannon. There's a Delaware historic marker to Patty Cannon, who was a kidnapper. And if you sit here and go, and again, we sit here and go, wait a minute, she was a slave kidnapper who captured free black folks and sold them into slavery, and there's a Delaware historic marker to her. Welcome to Delaware.
Yeah, they got a marker to her, and they won't name anything after Jim Seals Jr. What a country. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
What a country. It was going on all the time.
Wow.
Okay. This was the bad slave owner, Edwin Epps. Yeah. Okay. Legendary. And again, we're into the movie.
This is deep stuff.
The portrayal of the characters was incredible. I mean, you hated this guy.
I did.
Okay. I mean, this was real. I mean, when you left the theater, you had sympathy for certain characters, you hated certain characters, and some folks you were waiting for in the parking lot.
Did you actually do research on some of the folks who were in this movie?
Well, let me tell you what I did and what access I have to. Again, you distinguished me from the other historians. When I was researching 12 Years a Slave, I went to the University of Delaware Library. And the University of Delaware Library has digitized early African-American newspapers, abolitionist newspapers, and anti-slavery newspapers. Mm-hmm. They're all digitized, they're all online. And you go in and Google Solomon Northup, and these newspapers from 1852 and 1853 show up. And they're newspapers from Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass was one of the few black voices that we had at the time. Right. So it's not an interpretation through history. It's a black guy, and this is what we're looking for, saying, what did he think of how Northup was treated? And you're getting a paper, just as you opened up the paper today and are looking at what's going on currently, this is opening up a paper from 1852, okay, and saying, what did they think of Solomon Northup when he showed up? Now, the response is the response that you would expect. Okay, he showed up and somebody said he's lying. And you say, wait a minute, why would the guy tell this story? And so he had to go through a series of trying to prove that his story was true. He disappeared for 12 years, okay? And then he showed up and said, I was kidnapped. And Six said, no, I don't believe that, okay?
Wow.
And then he wrote this book, and he found the folks who kidnapped him, the folks who traded him, the folks who kept him in slavery. Again, he was picking cotton, and this is part of the story. And if he didn't pick enough cotton, he had to pick 3, 4, 5 bales of cotton a day. He got whipped. They lined everybody up. They weighed the cotton, and if the cotton wasn't
put those on while he's talking. Is that okay?
If the cotton didn't weigh right, then he got lashes for every pound he was below the cotton that he should have picked. He tried to escape. Again, he could write. He found some paper. He found a pencil, and he had, again, you know the story, confidence in one guy to get this out and help me out, and the guy turned him in. And he was about to get beaten unmercifully at this stage.
It was powerful. It was, when I watched it, did you see that movie? You saw it too? When I watched it, you put yourself in our time. So you're like, how can somebody go through that? I would hit them back. You know what I mean? And because that's where your mindset is here. Like when the lady hit the girl with the cup, busted her face. I mean, that kind of stuff was like so powerful. You're like, won't you do something? But we couldn't.
Well, this becomes the issue. When you look at history, you can't look at the history of where we are now.
And that's what I'm saying, I was.
Well, you got to take yourself back.
Now you tell me.
And you got to say, how were folks living, okay? and there is such brutality, right? What we tell everybody today is, anybody can become president, and we got a black president, and, racism is gone, and everybody's, okay, we preach that. It wasn't that way then. So you got to go back then and say, well, what was it then when Northrop was there, and how could he be treated this way? Well, again, he was getting depressed at this stage of the game. He's sitting on the porch, and he says, I got to get out of here. Everybody on the plantation was picking on him. This was just a guy that just wanted to pick on him. Okay?
Every once in a while, let's go to the pictures, if you're awake back in there.
These are other slaves who were picking sugar cane with him. And then we end up with these subplots. Obviously, the slave master was, if we can say this on TV, sleeping with the slave girl. Yeah. And the wife obviously didn't like it, and she, wanted her.
She acted a very incredible role herself.
Oh, everybody was fantastic.
Let me ask you another question. I remember when you first told me about the movie, but it was only a certain amount of theaters compared to other movies.
Sure.
I mean, this movie was in like 10 theaters compared to other movies like Tom Hanks' movie or Hustler or Wolf on Wall Street was in 300 movies. Why is that?
The movie producers, again, try to do what they call build an audience for certain movies. And for this movie, for some reason, they decided to build an audience. They start off with 19, and then they go to 100, and then they go to 200. This movie never got to like 3,000 movie theaters.
Which is tragic.
Which is tragic, and I'm surprised that it's already won the Golden Globe and could win an Oscar.
And it should. Because I saw some of the movies that it's up against.
And it should. But, they rolled it out, and I guess it kept drawing audiences or making money, because, we're into making money. This was, again, a scene. Alfre Woodard was the only African-American born actress in the movie. And this is she who was married to a white plantation owner in the area. This, again, becomes this incredible relationship between the slave master and Patsy was her name. Was her name. This picture, again, these pictures came from Googling. This picture could not be Googled. It's not there. We're talking about
What picture is this?
We're talking about an 80-pound Patsy taking 100 lashes. Okay? That picture, again, they didn't put on the internet. And again, obviously, you and I had to sit through 100 lashes. Yeah. And as Solomon Northrop tells the story, 4 years later, Patsy was still suffering from having taken 100 lashes.
Wow.
Okay? That's the brutality that we're talking about, which was displayed in the movie.
I'll tell you, the movie was a tearjerker. Oh. I don't, folks, I hope you're watching. I hope you're enjoying this conversation, because we can't talk about basketball all the time. We're just not going to do it. We can't talk about the Olympics. I mean, this is Black History Month. We have to talk about history, and I hope that you get something from it. If not, turn to Andy Griffith's or the All-Star Game. Go ahead.
Very good. Obviously, there were these intimate relationships between the people. Solomon Northrop had to administer at least 50 of the lashes himself.
That was horrible.
It's horrible. Until the slave master took over the whip and started whipping her. And it became, they had a bonded relationship between the two of them in terms of their relationship. We should thank Brad Pitt. The reason why we're thanking Brad Pitt is because Brad Pitt was the producer on the movie. Wow. He put up his money, okay, to make sure this film happened and put, the directors and the actors together.
He liked black women.
I don't know about that. But obviously, Brad Pitt was in the movie. And Brad Pitt was the one who helped him get the message back to Saratoga Springs so that somebody could come down there and free him. So we not only thank Brad Pitt for making the movie, we thank Brad Pitt for his character in the movie for setting him free. This is the hug as Northrop was leaving. And he hugged Patsy, and again, it was a case of, obviously he didn't want to leave her behind, but hey
man, I got to go.
I got to go.
I have a family.
And he left her in slavery to continue to be a slave and abused as she was. Okay? And so nothing changed. Here again, he's reunited with his family. again, which is key. And there the movie ends. The cast, again, as we've said, is incredible, okay? Every character was believable. Every character did an incredible job. Although you see black folks in here, these are black folks from England, from Kenya, made up the cast. And the question came up that was asked, and this is a Golden Globe movie, but the question that the New Republic asked is, why isn't this a Spike Lee joint? You know, why didn't Spike Lee do this movie? Why are there no other black directors out there who handled...
That director's not from here?
England. He's
Wow.
he's an English director.
Okay.
Okay. And again, we're back to...
So why didn't we?
Well, obviously, it's as Trippy just said, it causes us to think. I mean, why didn't this story come out before? Why, you know, where has it been? Why isn't it in the textbooks? Why didn't they teach this in Newark High School? Okay. Is somebody hiding it from us, or are we hiding it from ourselves? Do we not want to know the history? This book's been out since 1852.
Wow.
Okay, the book is there. If some, you know, so if you want to go and find the book is there. You could have read it in the last, 160 years. But somehow this story is not brought to our attention, or we are so in this environment we're living in, so concerned about what's going on day to day that we don't think anything that happened 160 years ago has an impact on us. But it all does. And so this is a question in the dialogue of, what others, and not only in this case, what other stories are we missing? What other piece of history are we missing? What other stories are out there? We, again, are also concerned about the environment that Northrop came back to. Were all black folks treated like Northrop? Were free blacks treated better than Northrop? And the answer to the question, again, I expected you to say it already, they treated us all the same. I mean...
What made you, delve into this? What made you so interested, besides watching the movie, and because, again, you were one of the first people called to show or talk to me about it.
Sure.
Because I had never heard of it.
Sure.
What made you want to delve into it?
I've been doing research, and I'll go to my next slide, on the fugitive slave law of 1850. And again, I distinguish between the fugitive slaves and Northrop, who was free. And the only distinction is one was free and one was running away from slavery. But they were treated the same, okay? What happened with the fugitive slave law, they said anybody who ran away from slavery, their slave master could come to any northern state, any free state, and grab them. Arthur Burns, if you want to know a story greater and bigger than the Solomon Northrop story, you have to know the Arthur Burns story. Arthur Burns was a slave in Boston, Massachusetts. He had been free for 9 years. The fugitive slave law came out that said any slave master can come up and find his slave. The slave master came up and found Arthur Burns, took him to court. The judge said, "That's your slave, take him out of here."
And he was in a free state?
He was in a free state in Boston, Massachusetts.
I don't know if that's a free state now.
Okay, free state. Well, the fugitive slave law said it didn't matter whether the state was free or not. It was his property. So Burns was this guy's property. When he came out of the courtroom, there were 20,000, abolitionists in the street trying to keep Burns from going back to slavery. The city of Boston brought out cops, U.S. Army, U.S. Marines, and cannons on the streets of Boston to get him from the courthouse to Boston Harbor to take him back into slavery. 1,000 military and police force to take one guy back to slavery.
That's incredible.
It's incredible. Okay? There was another case up in Mount Holly, New Jersey, where 3 slaves had escaped, and the slave master tracked them down the mountain.
So these guys, but now we're gonna kind of do this stuff in sequence. So these guys could just come to a free state and grab the person.
Absolutely. It's called the Bloodhound Law. That's why it's called the Bloodhound Law.
We got some bloodhounds out there now.
It's
serious. It's how do you equate what was happening then to now?
Well,
the
the situation has changed. We no longer have something called slavery, but Michelle Alexander is trying to wake us up okay, and tried to tell us that there are more black men under the supervision of the criminal justice system now than that were.
This is the new Jim Crow.
This is the new Jim Crow. And so we have to say, let me see, is jail like slavery? It is to most folks. You can't vote. You can't get out. You can't get an education. You can't do anything. And so we have to say, you know, were we better off in slavery or better off in jail?
So after 1850, 1852, what happens?
The issue is 700,000 folks got killed, 440,000 of them black, 760,000 white folks got killed in the Civil War. What we're talking about is saying all of this is going on. What happened? The Civil War happened. 700,000 folks got killed. And you have to wrap your head around that and say 700,000 folks. More folks got killed in the Civil War than in all other wars the United States has ever fought. That's the kind of change. I mean, Sherman's marched to the sea. Sherman marched to Atlanta. He burned down the city of Atlanta. He burned down the city of Richmond. That's how slavery ended. They burned down the South.
Wow.
Okay? And you have to wrap your head around this and say, you know, how did we get out of slavery? Okay? Because Sherman went down and burned every major city in the South.
You know, this is, I always got to look at my camera folks, you know, because sometimes this stuff get deep. And I guess and every time I get you on the show, you kind of blow me away, and this takes a lot to intrigue me like this. So you start getting deeper and deeper into this stuff, right? So you start learning more and more. So what's driving you, and what comes out of it as far as you're concerned?
Well, it is a personal mission of my own to say to myself, how can I live in ignorance? Okay. And then I say, well, I got to share it with somebody. Okay. And so in the month of February, I'm doing 30 lectures.
Do you get frustrated?
I was frustrated before. I mean, and again, it goes back to my career in business. And I was treated like Barack Obama. Okay. And you say, you were the president? I said, no, I was an accountant. But white folks used to look me in the eye and said, I'm not doing my job because then it looked like you doing your job. So I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. And they're working for me.
Wow.
And then the same thing's happening in Washington, D.C. The folks are down there saying, we're going to make you a one-term president. They said, we're going to let you pass. They haven't passed the least amount of legislation in the history of the country is being done in Washington, D.C. because they ain't letting the black man do nothing.
You know, the last time you were on here, you were talking about genealogy. And a lot of folks called because they wanted to find out how could they find out about their ancestors and their family, and they wanted your phone number. And I'm sure you got a lot of phone calls. So when you even delve into this and delve into this guy's family, because you said his father was free.
Sure.
I mean, it gets deep.
Sure. Absolutely.
I don't know if anyone would have a question for Cy, but I'm gonna give out the number anyway. Remember, we can't put it up on the screen anymore because Comcast said, okay, forget you guys. So the number is 661-4468. Let's see if we get any phone calls about this tonight.
Sure.
Look, we're not talking about a shooting, so we might not get calls. This is an educational Black History Channel, okay? 302-661-4468. And also, I forgot to mention, Del State gave me a bunch of these tonight to talk about their Scholarship Sunday, but they gave us no date. I mean, they gave us a date, but they gave us no time. We know the Scholarship Sunday. We don't know if there's a cost. But we know they're having the scholarship on Sunday, March the 9th. How much? Who knows? What time? Who knows? Okay, this is a deep conversation, so I don't want to waste any more time. Go ahead.
Let's talk about Harry Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, because what happened was Northrop got out and he wrote a book. Okay?
Hold on, is this okay to take a quick question?
Sure, go ahead.
How you doing?
Hi, Norm Jersey. Enjoying your program this evening.
Thank you.
I just have a question for Mr. Wolford there. Today, I had, on the Napa Hour, I had Philip Nord, who is the director of the Rockwood Mansion. He has found out or come to reference that the Rockwood Mansion now has something or had something to do with the Underground Railroad. Is there any way that you can reference or give me some information as to how we can further find out more about that, because there has been, as he told it today, there are markings there and other things that now reference that there were slaves, and that has a lot to do with the Underground Railroad.
Thank
the
you.
Rockwood Mansion.
Thank you very much, Jules.
There is an Underground Railroad Coalition in Wilmington, which covers the entire state, and many of the organizations are involved in it, and they have good researchers there. So my recommendation is to start with them and see if they know anything about the mansion, and see if they have any recommendations.
Okay, you were going to say, Si.
Well, again, I'm trying to give you a picture of what the world looked like when Solomon Northup was free. He wrote his book, and his book didn't sell 1 million copies. But Uncle Tom's Cabin did. Uncle Tom's Cabin, during its day, which is 1850, 1851, 52, sold more books than the Bible. And you have to back up from that and say, there was a book that sold more books than the Bible? I mean, what
Uncle
was
Tom's Cabin.
Uncle Tom's Cabin.
And my brother's name is Uncle Tom. but it's Abdul when you're not signing this check.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. How you doing?
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, Norm. Good evening, Si. This is Brother Dwight. Yes, I did see the movie 12 Years a Slave. I think I made a comment about it about a couple months ago at the Wilmington City Council meeting. But let me just very briefly say that I think that it is definitely appropriate that the stars of this particular show were not born in the United States. Well, I put it like this: in the same way that Barack Obama was not a part of the '68 civil rights movement. I think that when I looked at the movie and thought about it, as I was leaving the theater, I didn't really know what to think at the time, and I think it took a couple days later for me to reflect on the fact that what I had watched was a satire of a condition that exists today in the United States, especially amongst those of African descent.
Dwight, hold on for 1 second. You wanted to comment?
Well, I was just agreeing, again, what Dwight always does is Dwight always is a great thinker and thinks through the process. And again, we have to take ourselves out of our mindset, as you started off saying. I think of it as the way we think today. No, you got to think about it the way they were thinking.
Yeah, and I couldn't. I'm being honest. You know what I mean?
The way they were thinking then. And then you have to reflect on it and say, how have things changed? Have they changed? And then you have to reflect on it. How do we get to where we're trying to get to?
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Dwight. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm listening to Si, and he's absolutely correct. When Solomon, it just goes to show how unconscious African or African American of slavery descent was during that time. And in addition, he was a musician, and how unconscious our musicians are today, to the point that we would be permitted to be tricked into a business deal and we put our trust in individuals that really don't mean us any good. I want to end just by saying that I believe during this time it was illegal to import slaves. So therefore, what the bounty hunters were doing were traveling up north or to the free states where they were in fact kidnapping individuals. And I think that still exists today. I think Mrs. Alexander, in her book, the new Jim Crow, restates what we already know is the obvious. And I think the obvious that I can observe is from what we've been doing through the pardon program, is that there needs to be a restoration of our rights of citizenship. This is a citizenship question that really
Dwight, let me take another call. I got somebody holding up. Okay, thanks for the call.
Thank you, man.
Let me make a comment on Dwight, who always puts his finger on
Hold on for 1 second. Hold on for 1 second. Go ahead.
on the situation.
Wait, ho. Turn your TV down for 1 second.
We become
It's
we
not-
become desensitized to the condition we're living in, which says that kids get shot on the street every night, probably tonight or last night, and we say, hey, it's the condition that we're living in. There are no jobs in Wilmington, and we say it's the condition we're living in. We have to get to a point to say, hey, we have to make some change. We have to get to where we're trying. We have to get to the promised land. I mean, we've been trying to get to the promised land since at least Malcolm or Martin or somebody.
My brother, okay, because he said Muhammad is not really mentioned, or Elijah Muhammad is not given enough credit as history. I don't know if you've given any research on that. Sure. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Great program, and it's a lot of us that are interested in this kind of informative dialogue, conversation, and information that you're giving out. Couple of real quick questions. One, I don't know if you saw the movie Django or not, but the Samuel L. Jackson role. I want your opinion on that. How many African Americans you think I know we talk about the white man being responsible for slavery in part, and I know that, but how many blacks that had them roles like Samuel Jackson led to a lot of African Americans never getting out of slavery or being recaptured? And the other thing is, you made a comment earlier about the small amount of legislation being passed by Barack Obama, and I know you attributed to that being black. But I want to just say this, and I'm African American too. I think that a lot of his legislation, while I'm not saying that none of that's not the curse that he's black, the problem that he's black. I think a lot of it is just the fact that his policies are they're indifferent to, and I think it's more or less on the principle more than on the color. I'll hang up and listen though.
Thank you for the call.
I didn't
Take the first call.
I didn't see Django, okay, but let's go back to Patty Cannon. I mentioned that Patty Cannon was a kidnapper and a slave catcher. The history is that
Patty Cannon black?
Patty Cannon was white, but where I'm getting to, she had a gang. It was the Patty Cannon gang, okay? And the history is that 4 or 5 members of her gang were black guys, okay? And so Patty Cannon was using black guys to catch runaway slaves and using black guys to catch free slaves to sell them back into slavery. This is about money, okay? And so, I didn't see Django, but I got that Django was helping out the folks who were keeping folks in slavery, but that goes on all the time. I mean,
What about the number of blacks who sold blacks into slavery?
well, those are folks in Africa. Again, the Africans, had slaves as their culture, and many of them probably didn't think it was, against their culture or law to sell their enemies. They were at war with each other, so their enemies they used to enslave, and their enemies they used to sell off to the Europeans who showed up. So,
if you have a question for Cy, the number is 661-4468. 661-4468, and I'm sure he will answer any question as it relates to black history, slavery, and how the whole slave trade went down. And you were getting into...
Well, Uncle Tom's Cabin had an incredible impact. Again, you would think, or you would hope, that when Solomon Northup came out with his book and told how he would treat it, that folks would say, hey, we got to fix this. We got to do something. We got to end slavery. Well, Uncle Tom's Cabin had that impact. It changed opinions of slavery, and it was written in 29 different languages. You got to understand,
Wow.
she's in 1850. This book was selling, a million.
What is Uncle Tom's Cabin about?
It's the same situation. It's about Uncle Tom.
You have to turn your TV down. That's okay.
The comparison was always made in some of the articles that I read between Uncle Tom and Solomon Northup. Uncle Tom was a slave, and he was, a likable slave. And then his slave master died, and he got sold downstream to Simon Legree. And Simon Legree is a stereotype of Edwin Epps, and you know who Epps is. Mm-hmm. And so the comparison between the characters in Uncle Tom Cabin and the folks who were involved in Northrop are there. I mean, Simon Legree used to walk around with a whip and whip everybody.
In your studies, right? In your studies, Who would you attribute to? I mean, I know we talk about Lincoln. Let's say on the black side, some of the single most important people in the movement to abolish slavery and to move on.
There was only one, and that was Frederick Douglass, because Frederick Douglass had a newspaper, and nobody else had a newspaper, and nobody else had a voice.
Is Frederick Douglass one of the greatest abolitionists or black leaders that you've encountered during that time?
Well, the problem is, as with anybody, he takes his hits, okay? And when I say...
The reason why I asked you that, because Jim Baker had always told me that. He thought Frederick Douglass was an incredible guy. Why did he take his hits?
The critics of him said he the only guy who had a newspaper. Of course.
So, hello, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hi to both of you.
How you doing?
Okay, I'd like to ask a question. Are you familiar that 12 Years a Slave was also a PBS story a month prior before it came out in the movie? All different people. Avery Brooks was Solomon. He was a carpenter in the 12 Years a Slave. Same concept. Different movie. The movie came out in the theater. This came out on PBS a month prior to the movie coming out in the theater. Is he familiar with that? Because we saw the whole thing on PBS.
I wasn't familiar with that, but I think if you were listening, I told you about the story of Arthur Burns, and Arthur Burns had 20,000 folks in the harbor of city of Boston who helped him escape. That was a PBS special also, and again, it just did incredible story of bringing out the Army and the Marines and cannons to get one slave back into slavery. Mm-hmm. So PBS obviously does an incredible job.
Mm-hmm. All right, 302-661-4468, 302-661-4468. I would hope that folks, especially some young folks, parents would give them an opportunity to call in so they could get some dialogue and understand and learn about slavery and black history and how this whole thing evolved. That'd be 661-4468. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let's get into the law, because again, Solomon Northup is getting out, and were there any laws against kidnapping black folks? Were there any laws which would put the slave catchers in jail? Well, we're talking about something you probably haven't heard of. I'd never heard of it. Prigs in Pennsylvania. What happened was some slave catchers came to Pennsylvania and captured this runaway slave and took her back to Maryland. Pennsylvania had a law that said any slave here gets due process. They have to go through the criminal justice system. They have to have a jury trial, okay? So they went and found Prigs and arrested him and put him on trial. It went to the Supreme Court of the United States, okay? And they decided that Pennsylvania did not have the right to put any obstacles.
Supreme Court to this?
The United States Supreme Court said that Pennsylvania had created an obstacle to the folks of Maryland getting their slaves back, and the law was void, okay? And so that meant that they set the slave catcher free because they said Pennsylvania put this obstruction to the return.
Let's take a couple calls. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hello, how you doing? This is Larry Mathis.
Hey, Larry.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Good. Just had a question. Just wanted to know if the gentleman, have he ever seen Hidden Colors?
No, I haven't.
You saw it?
Oh, okay. If you would like to get it, I do own LJ's Playpen Academy, and I would love for you to come by, and I got a DVD for you to see it, because I'm often teaching the young men around Wilmington here their history.
Okay.
So they can be proud of themselves.
Where are you?
I'm located over at 2601 Carter Street, exactly across from Union Baptist Church. And Norman, you're welcome to come by and get one too.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Okay, thank you. I know exactly where you are. Thank you, man. Interesting. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Yes, I just want to make a comment. I know we are always talking about heads of tribes in Africa having slaves and selling their people into slavery. The difference with the slavery that took place there and the slave trade that took place here was the difference was in the brutality. The slaves over in Africa was not beat. the way they were here. They were able to marry. They were able to actually be part of a family unit as being the slaves in the tribe. The other comment that I also want to make is you talked about the woman who had, the white woman who actually had a gang who would capture free blacks and resell them. I wonder if any of those black men, if they had stood up to that white woman and said, we're not going to do it, then they would have been, they were already slaves. But to stand in front of this woman and tell her we're not going to be a part of that, then the brutality would have even been worse. So I just wanted to make that comment, the difference between slavery there, the difference between slavery here, and that the black men didn't have any say in selling their brothers, in capturing their brothers, and selling free men back into slavery. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Let me make another comment. The slave trade came from Africa to the Americas, North America and South America. 2/3 of the slave trade went to South America. As she just indicated, slavery in North America was brutal. Okay, it was institutionalized, etc. The slaves who went to South America were incorporated into the culture within almost 1 or 2 generations. So you find some of the African...
you got to turn your TV down.
Okay.
You find some of the African traditions show up in Brazil. And
This is deep. This is deep. How you doing? Welcome to the show.
All right, thank you. Will you get Mr. Wolford to talk a little bit about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson? I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you.
Well, I have another presentation I'll be giving next week on Albert Lewis. Albert Lewis was a white guy in Newark, Delaware, who fathered a brown baby. And basically, we're talking about the same thing. Jefferson had a relationship with Sally Hemings. And again, it is part of the culture that we don't talk about, how we are not, quote unquote, pure-bred Africans. We are intermingled with the Europeans, and this is a part of the history. And to be able to talk about Thomas Jefferson or Albert Lewis, somebody right here in Newark.
How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, Storm, in here under the weather a little bit. That's why I didn't join you tonight at Monday Club. But I'm just calling to make a comment. Want to commend you for the great job that you're doing, Norman, highlighting the old timers at the Monday Club, going back a few days, a few weeks ago, and putting it on TV, as well as what you did for Marvin and things you've done for me at Canaan Church and all the other good stuff you're doing out there, Norm. So I want to commend you, and also want to commend Sal for the great job that he's done over the years. He's really become superb in his presentations and his research on this. So I want to commend both you guys. And Norman, just remind your viewers also to let folks know that many people don't have cable. They got Dish and this, that, and the other, DirecTV. But they can go on YouTube and be able to see these shows because they are very beneficial to our community. Thank you, my brother. I talk to you.
Hey, Herman, you know what?
Yes.
And I don't know if I hear you a little sick. I don't know if you heard my opening dialogue. I love to get you on because I love the way you talk about history in our city and our state and county as it relates to black elected officials. I mean, you like a freaking sponge. I always tell you that. So I have to get you on, and I mean this sincerely. I don't, because we all battle and talk stuff to each other sometimes. I think that when it comes to guys like you and Marvin and Miss Hicks and Barbara, they were there to. We had so many people in our community in South Wilmington. I think it'd be a tragedy that something is not named in you guys' honor. And I don't just say that because you're on the phone. And I say this about Jim Seals and I say this, and I say this all the time because we lose so much of that. And some of the young guys, they look at some of the fights that you guys have, and think that you're just blowing smoke. And I think that we can all agree to disagree. But if we didn't have guys like you guys in these rumbles, I don't know where we would be. And I just want to commend you.
Let me make a comment to Herman.
Thanks, Herman.
Well, hold on.
Take care now.
Hold on.
Okay.
Don't go away for a second.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I am now researching the first African American city councilman in the city of Wilmington. And there's some. We all know John Hopkins. Obviously, was there for 32 years. There was actually a guy before him by the name of Thomas Postel who.
Oh wow, didn't know that. That's one up on me, Norman.
Well,
he sent it to me.
This is where I'm going. I mean, the history of your father is key, and we have to bring that to the table as a history lesson of saying, well, how did he get elected? Well, what did he do? Well, what obstacles did he have to overcome? What was the conditions that he had to work in? And this is part of the history book because we're talking about Barack Obama trying to overcome some stuff, and we know that Herman Holloway Sr. was down there by himself half the time, winning some battles and probably losing some battles, and the history is just important.
Yeah, thanks, Herman.
Well, that's great. I look forward to working with both of you guys. And let me say also, Norman, that Senator Holloway ran in 1943 against Mr. Leo Dugan for city council over here, and he got beat down. My grandfather even worked against him and told him not to get on the ticket when Leo Dugan was the Republican over here, and my dad ran against him. But we got a lot of good history, Norman. Whenever you want to do it, you know, if I'm available, I'll be glad to plug on in and help out a little bit.
Thank you, buddy. When you talk about the first black city councilman, his name was?
Thomas Postel was his name.
Thomas Postel. It sounded like a French.
Could have been. He owned a hotel in Wilmington.
Wow. And what year was that?
1905. Okay.
1905. I didn't know that. But you know what? His picture is not in the city county building.
Probably not.
No.
Okay.
I mean, they got the history, right, of all the councilmen. And I got to go look probably tomorrow, Tuesday. But I don't remember seeing a Thomas Postel.
These, again, are the articles at the University of Delaware. And, again, you just Google Wilmington City Council, you know, African Americans, and Postel.
How does Jim Baker know that? Because Jim Baker's also pretty good with that. Okay. Thomas Postel.
Well, what is intriguing about Thomas Postel is in 1905, we're still living in a segregated society. We're still trying to get an education. We're trying to do all those things. And then you said, well, this guy must have come in and fixed all those problems. What Thomas Postel did as soon as he got elected, okay, was put his son on the payroll. And you sit there and go, he was a politician. So we're thinking too much. I mean, we somehow.
Was he a Republican or a Democrat?
Well, this is where he got his power. This is why the story, you know, has to get out there. He was a Republican because all black folks were Republican because Lincoln was a Republican. But when he got on city council, okay, there were 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. He started voting for the Democrats. And so the Democrats the Democrats were trying to get him to vote with the Democrats, and they were giving him all these patronage jobs. That's how he's got his son on the payroll.
Wow.
Okay? So he said, well, if I vote with the Democrats, why don't you put my son on the payroll? And they said, sure. And you know how politics works. It doesn't work the way us folks out here think it should work. All these deals are being cut. So rather than help black folks get an education or get a job, he put his son on the payroll.
You know, when we're talking about black history, and I know we're going off a little bit from the 1840s and 50s, and I've spoken a lot about me personally, Jim Seals Jr. I mean, and I know you're a historian. I mean, to see this guy who's the first African American mayor in the city of Wilmington, and not to have anything named in his honor. Just me, because I appreciate you guys. I mean, you're a little older than I.
Sure.
So I appreciate you. Just some of the fights that you've been in. Don't you find that bizarre?
Well, again, I'm throwing out names. John Hopkins. Okay, we should have a statue to John Hopkins. And you know, if you looked at 32 years in city council, had a movie theater, was a pharmacist. Okay. But again, we have lost his legacy, and we have lost it. And so somehow we have, and again, you talk about frustration. Why do I get frustrated? Because there's no audience for what I'm saying in most instances. And sometimes when I speak, I'm speaking to all white folks. I mean, we should celebrate our history.
That brings up another, and we only got like 2 minutes, but why is all the history at University of Delaware and not at Delaware State University?
It's mystified.
Wow.
And why are all the history teachers at Delaware State University white history teachers? But I'm not going to go too deep into that.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Si. We'll be doing this again soon, right? Again, this show is dedicated to Miss Janice Williams, a friend of my good friend Dave Henderson and his wife, Janice. I hope you're enjoying the show, and thank you for always watching. And again, congratulations, thank you, to the Monday Club for the tribute. I had a great time with all the older school guys, and we had an incredible turnout. That's what he was talking about. And Marvin Thomas, congratulations on your retirement, and I know you have your family and friends came through. Kevin Washington, happy birthday. And Delaware State, if anyone knows anyone from Delaware State, I do, I'm going to call someone. This is kind of bizarre. B.B. Coker, I know you probably come on and talk about this, but a scholarship Sunday, what's the name? It has no time. It has no time. It has no cost. Nothing. It has a lot. It talks about we spend a lot of money on these flyers, and they gave me a lot of flyers. But such is life, man. Gundy Jacobs will be sitting in for me a lot in the next coming months, just because of my travels. And I hope we give Gundy the same kind of love and respect that you give me. I think he's going to do an excellent job. And I hope he has guys on like you.
Very good, hopefully.
Thank you. You're an incredible guy when it comes to history. God, you blew me away. Thank you. Did you want to say anything?
Oh, no.
I
get a final say. Well, are we doing this next week? Are you going to tell her we're going to try this next week? What are we going to do next week?
I don't know about next week. I want to bring you on another week.
Fine. Okay.
I think I just want to do like a panel of folks.
Sure.
Just get people to just talk. Like blacks in jobs, some young folks, old folks. Just talk about anything. This is you.
Again, as we're saying,
and it don't have to be February.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Let's talk about it.
Again, we should be absorbing this, and we should be thinking about
Go see 12-Year Slave or find it somewhere.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed another good show. I think, man, I like these shows more than almost any of them. Thank you. But they like Geno Jennings.